So welcome to First Church in Belmont first program for the Date with Death Club. And I will tell you that this curriculum that we are using, which was developed by a Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Karen Johnston, is a wonderful, carefully done curriculum on all aspects of death. We're going to be using it, I hope, for the next several years, but I am so grateful to Jackie James, who has offered to take us through this first session on the program, which we are going to get comfortable with death talk. And now, without any further ado, you all know Jackie. I'm going to turn the program over to her and let it begin.
Hello, everyone. I'm so gratified to see all of you here, especially with such a topic that I expect a lot of people would rather avoid talking about. It's good to see all of you, and I really appreciate your being here. I want to start by thanking Lillian and Susan for inviting me to work with them on this and helping me all along the way, guiding me and giving me advice and support. I'm also appreciative of Sam Foster, who's here as a backup for any technical problems. When Lillian and Susan approached me about this program, they knew they wanted to do it, and I knew that I was interested. Mostly because of my experiences with death in my lifetime. When I was in college, my father was 46 years old and came home, strong, healthy man, never been sick, never even missed a day of work, and had an aneurysm in the stem of the brain overnight and never spoke another word. When he was taken to the hospital, I was called home from school and was told that he would live about 3 days, if that. And he lived for a year in a semi-comatose state. And he was strong and healthy. He could have lived for 30 years like that, being tube fed and kept in comfortable positions in the bed. But the way he died was, I believe, and nobody ever told me this, was not explicit, but I believe that the medical personnel decided to stop turning him as much, and that he developed pneumonia. And then my mother and we agreed not to treat the pneumonia, and he died within a couple of weeks after that. So he was helped to die, and it was the first time that I had the experience of wanting someone to die to alleviate their suffering. My father's life ended on the day that the aneurysm struck. He had no life left, but he lived for a year. And then my mother, who just died a year ago this Sunday, lived to be 104. And she lived healthily and well until she was 101, when she then fell and did some damage to her hip. And we had to move her into assisted living. And over the course of 3 years, she kind of died cell by cell. With her limited mobility, her body started to break down. And once again, I was praying for her death because she was not living the life that she had lived or wanted to live or expected to live, especially having talked to me about her wishes for her death all her life, ever since my father had that horrible experience. So I've been interested in these issues for a long time. And as my two stories show, we all have a date with death. but we don't know when it is. So that is both our challenge and our opportunity tonight to open up the discussion about this and learn more about how we are thinking about it and how other people are thinking about it. We're not the first people to want to talk about this. There's actually been a growing death positive movement for some time now. And it includes things such as death cafes, which I'm going to show you a video about in just a few minutes, where people get together and talk about death the way we plan to here. There's also death over dinner, in which families get together and share their wishes for their end of life experience. The Conversation Project, which is a similar thing. And there are a whole lots of other programs like this one that encourage people to do what we're doing tonight, talk openly about death and dying. As Lillian said, this was developed by a UU minister. It's an extensive curriculum, and we're going to choose from it to develop courses over the next few years. Tonight will be about getting more comfortable talking about death, and also about being comfortable talking about positive aspects of aging. We are following this curriculum, but Lillian and Susan and I, being rebels that we are, we have adapted it a great deal to fit the needs of what we think First Church will have a good experience with. We've tried to set up this session so that all of you have an opportunity to reflect on your own knowledge and experience with death, dying, and aging, and to share those with each other. So before I go on, I want to stop there and ask each of you to introduce yourself. I think we all know each other mostly, but to say a little bit about what drew you to this program. So everybody will get to speak tonight. I don't think we thought there would be so many people. So in order to get the program going, I'm going to move on, if that's okay with everybody, unless someone has a burning. Okay, I'm going to now share my screen. So I just want to go briefly over the agenda for tonight. It's, as I've said, we want to just establish a shared understanding of what a Date with Death Club is, and how it might be like the other programs and not, and what it is not. I want to go over a few rules of engagement. As you all have already pointed out, this is a complicated and emotional subject, and we want to have some rules so that we can learn together in the best possible way. Again, we want to grow comfortable talking about death and with the process of aging as a positive aspect of life. The alternative to death, as people say. We will have opportunities to reflect on the conversations. And to inspire some of our conversations, I'm going to have 3 poems read, and we'll have a chance to react to each one. And then we will finally have a breakout group to discuss a question with each other and report out at the end of the breakout groups. I hope everybody will think of one takeaway to take from tonight, and one thing that they're thankful for tonight. Maybe something somebody has already said is something you can be thankful for. And then I will ask Lillian to do closing words. Everybody okay with that? So what the Death Club is we don't have much practice talking about death. People die in hospitals at home. And we don't, or at home, and we don't bring bodies into the home anymore the way we used to for visitations. And all of this makes the idea of death, the actuality of death, invisible, mysterious, even scary. So what do we do when something is scary? We're hearing from many circles, some of you alluded to this in the introductions, that we need to confront it head on and talk about it and learn what others are thinking about it. So that's what we're here about tonight, having an opportunity to talk about an uncomfortable subject with members of First Church, and hopefully reflect with each other without judgment about each other's experience and to learn from each other. Having said that, the author of this curriculum says that we also need to say what these sessions are not. They're not a therapy group, although we do hope to be supportive of each other. It's not based on any religious dogma, and it's not meant to be morbid or solemn. In fact, my husband told me not to make it deadly. So there's some other agreements that are recommended by this author. While we are here to learn from each other and again to support each other in facing this difficult subject, it's not a time to advise each other or try to teach each other what we know. It's not a time to fix each other or correct each other. We all come to this with different levels of experience, different kinds of experiences. And she bases her cheeky way of putting this on the basis of somebody named Parker Palmer, who said in groups like this, we don't want any fixing, saving, advising, or correcting each other. And if we said this in the South, it would be no fixing, no saving, no advising, and no correcting. So does that make sense, everybody?
Yep.
Okay, great. And then there are probably some other agreements we should make. Lillian has put some of them forward already. If you can put your pronouns with your name, that would be helpful. We do hope to start and end on time. I do hope you will participate with your video as much as you can. If you need to turn it off for a minute, that's okay too. As Lillian said, please raise your hand to ask questions. And we want to think about confidentiality. I think it's perfectly fine to share anything from this group about the content of the meeting, but not anything that anybody has shared a personal experience in the group. And so does all this mean that people who are interested in these programs are suicidal, or do they want to die? As I mentioned earlier, this program is about advocating for changing our attitudes toward dying. And here we see two women who have been at the forefront of this positive death movement. One who founded the Order of the Good Death, which is a program similar to the one that we're talking about, and another that's called Going with Grace, which trains death doulas. I don't know if you've heard of those before. I had not before I read this. But death doulas are like birth doulas. They help people through the last phases of dying. And they're a little different than hospice in that they stay with the family. They don't do any medical intervention. They're just there for the spiritual and philosophical approach to death and dying. One of the examples I read from the kinds of things that doula does is finds out what's going on in the family, what's complicated about the death. And in one instance, I read that a doula helped people write forgiveness letters to family members. So I want to show you one example of a positive death movement. I hope this works. This is a video of a death cafe. It says that it's been around for 3 years, but this video is a little bit dated, although what it says about the death cafes is not dated. So
Yeah, we can hear it.
So if we
Can you
can all
make it
go around the
larger?
room and introduce ourselves
I can.
and say why we want to talk about death with other people.
On a Wednesday evening in October, about 20 people are gathered in a St. Joseph coffee shop for a pop-up event called a Death Cafe.
A death cafe is just a safe place for people to get together and talk about anything that relates to death and dying. It's oftentimes strangers that get together and talk about what is ever on their mind, and they drink coffee and eat cake.
Talking about death isn't everyone's cup of tea or coffee. In fact, most of us avoid the topic altogether. But this gathering is part of a global movement that began in the UK 3 years ago. Soon after that, Megan Mooney brought death cafes to the Midwest. Death cafes meet regularly in Columbia, Kansas City, Lawrence, and more are in the works. From morbid curiosity to an inability to talk with their loved ones, death cafes attract people of all ages for a variety of reasons. This fall, students at Park University decided to host their own death cafe in the library. Their professor, Laurel Hilliker, teaches the sociology of death, dying, and bereavement. She says over time we have become a society that's death avoidant, and death cafes could help overcome this.
40 or 50 years ago, when death was in the home, they saw the person when they died. They saw what death really looked like. They saw the decline more, and they were able to process it. And today, it's just a very changed world. And I think that we need to be more comfortable. We need more educational programs to kind of give us that understanding of why we're so afraid.
Death cafes help people open up and have those conversations with other people that want to have those conversations, which makes it easier to turn around and have those conversations with the ones you love.
Marcy Mishnick is the vice president of the Funeral Consumers Alliance of Greater Kansas City, a nonprofit that provides resources for end-of-life planning.
We encourage families to take a hands-on approach if that's what they want with after-death care. That can be very therapeutic.
At a recent conference, the Funeral Consumers Alliance offered presentations about body donation and natural burial, as well as several mini death cafe sessions.
I have attended death cafes, and it's a great place to talk about death because you really never know where the conversation is going to lead. Each death cafe kind of takes on a life of its own.
One of Kansas City's more unique death cafe meeting places is at Signature Funerals at 80th and State Line. While this death cafe is not affiliated with her business, owner Kathy Boomer says the movement is in line with her philosophy of fostering open conversations about death.
What Signature Funerals does is we try and lead with education and getting that education ahead of your need.
Boomer says too often, families don't know their options or their loved ones' wishes, and as a result have to make a lot of decisions during a time that is already difficult.
So the people that do the pre-planning and leave that information for their children are given a gift.
We're gonna go ahead and wrap up.
Mooney says as a result of death cafes, she's seen people create advance directives and tell family what they want to have happen when they die. But the conversations are helping people not only grasp planning for death, it's also helping people focus more on life.
And the objective of Death Cafe is to increase awareness of death with the view of helping people make the most of their finite lives. And I see that happening all the time.
When I left, I felt like I needed to enjoy life and think more about the decisions I make now. And so it was more uplifting. It wasn't that morbid atmosphere that I thought it was going to be.
After each Death Cafe, participants come together for a group reflection and then give some feedback.
We have on our program evaluation, did your views on death change as a result of attending this? And people will say, no, but my views on life did.
So talking about it can be good. It can help us be less afraid, clarify the confusion around it. It can help us in the sense of isolation, especially when doing it in a group such as this. It can make us feel like we're one of many. The idea that we're in this all together. And this is one of our goals for this Death Club here at First Church. And tonight's session is designed to increase our conversation with talking about death. I hope that has already begun, but also to grow a more positive regard for the process of aging. And with that, to think about our own relationship to concepts of independence and dependence. So, as we all know, people are living longer today than they used to. People who live to age 65 can expect to live 20, even 30 years more, especially the wealthy and educated among us. It's not the same for racial and ethnic minorities. This is my mom pictured here on her 100th birthday when she was still healthy and vital. And we also know that as people age, on average, people are healthier than they used to be. And this has to do with mostly the successful treatment of heart disease and strokes. The number of centenarians has already increased from an estimated 70,000 in 1950, and we expect there are 97,000 today, and we expect there to be 340,000 in the world, with the highest concentrations in the US and Japan. So again, today there are about 97,000 centenarians. And I do want to show that this isn't the same for all groups. So it's longest for the Asians, Latinx, and the shortest for the American Indian, Alaskan natives. So there have been declines in life expectancy over the last couple of years, maybe by a year or two. Right now, the life expectancy for males is 77, 76, and for women, it's 80, 81. And those both represent declines from a couple of years ago. And that has to do with both drug overdoses, suicides among young people, and COVID. So this means that we have a lot more time to age on average than we used to. So what I want to do right now is talk about the link between aging and death, and invite you to ponder on that for me with a few minutes. I'm doing this because we tend to think of aging and death as going together. And this may be splitting hairs a bit, but I think that's one of the things that makes us dread aging. It's true that death comes at the end of our life, but young people die too, even though we say they died too young or they died before their time. Death visits people who are not old often enough that we have to acknowledge that they're not one and the same. And the same thing is of illness. We think of aging and illness being linked together. But we face illnesses across the lifespan too. People get illnesses at all ages of the lifespan. So when we think about this, even as we might be complaining about getting older and all the exigencies of aging that we are feeling in our bodies and our minds, we might consider the fact that aging is better than the alternative. As Dr. Seuss says, you're only old once. And in some corners, thinking about aging and death makes us think we should avoid aging and dying, in fact. And there's evidence everywhere of the avoidance of aging. There are creams and surgeries and pills, Botox, anything to make us look younger. And there was a recent article in the Boston Globe promising research with mice in which cells were reset so that the mice were literally 10 years younger in mice years. In fact, there is a movement to extend life even farther, even reverse aging, as with the mice. So let's now see if we can look at another video advertising a program that promised the cutting edge of extending life, even reversing age.
Come to the cutting edge of age reversal at the all-new RADFest 2022. Meet the innovators pioneering next-generation solutions. Ask the questions that matter most to you and get the answers you can't find anywhere else. Explore the most current products and services with hands-on demonstrations at Rad City, taking place in San Diego, California on October 6th through the 9th. All in a safe environment in which your health is held uppermost. Connect with the people that inspire you to live longer and better. Click the link below or visit www.radfest.com to register today.
So When we face our mortality and think about the fact that we all do have a date with death, and we just saw in this video evidence from the corner that there is this impulse to resist and hide from aging and illness and death. But there's also another corner in which we turn with curiosity to the very same realities, where there are positive aspects of aging. There's the possibility for creativity, for new adventures, for time to do the kinds of things we always wanted to do, and social action. All of these kinds of things are potential for the kinds of things we might do with these extended lives that we have. So I wanted to invite you to a conversation about this. Which corner are you in? In what ways do you experience the impulse to try to hide from aging? Or are you more likely to look with curiosity toward this sort of uncertain future? This, again, I'd like to open up for discussion. I will say that I know that I do try to do things to improve my appearance and stay healthy and do things that try to keep me healthy and stay engaged in the activities that have always meant something to me. But I also do look forward to the kinds of things that I have the freedom to do when I didn't have that kind of freedom working all the time. So I'd like to hear what other people are saying. Do you feel pressure? Right. All right, I think I need to move on. I'm going to share my screen again. So this is another issue, and some of you talked about this in her poem about a Russian doll. Leonore Friedman writes that aging sharpens acutely our sensitivity to issues of dependence and independence. And this happens across the lifespan. We're always aging. Growing up when we are little is a struggle about becoming independent and resisting dependence on our parents or our caregivers. And then we have this version of the same thing at the other end of the life cycle, which we try to maintain our autonomy and hope that things look the same as they did when we were 30 or 40, without acknowledging the inevitable changes of aging, which is what we were just talking about. So to help us think more about this issue of aging and how it goes across the lifespan, I want us to look at 3 poems. One is a poem about youth and the story of youth as growing older and midlife, and then one from older ages. And I've asked Susan to read the midlife one and Doris Hunter to read the one about older ages. And the first one, I hope I can get the author of the poem to read it. Let's see if this works.
11. What they don't understand about birthdays, and what they never tell you, is that when you're 11, you're also 10 and 9 and 8 and 7 and 6 and 5 and 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. And when you wake up on your 11th birthday, you expect to feel 11, but you don't. You open your eyes and everything's just like yesterday, only it's today. And you don't feel 11 at all. You feel like you're still 10, and you are, underneath the year that makes you 11. Like some days, you might say something stupid, and that's the part of you that's still 10. Or maybe some days you might need to sit on your mama's lap because you're scared, and that's the part of you that's 5. And maybe one day when you're all grown up, maybe you will need to cry like if you're 3. And that's okay. That's what I tell Mama when she's sad and needs to cry. Maybe she's feeling 3. Because the way you grow old is kind of like an onion, or like the rings inside a tree trunk, or like the little wooden dolls that fit one inside the other, each year inside the next one. That's how being 11 years old is.
So let me see if there are a few reactions to that. And ask Susan to read the next poem, if I can get it up there. Susan?
Okay, this poem is named Cold by Ellen Bass. On this early morning in Vancouver, my son and I stop on our way to breakfast when we hear the Kenyon will soon be running past this corner. Of course, we want to see his gorgeous stride, but after half an hour, I'm shivering in my thin sweater. That's when my son begins to rub his back, offering up the heat of his palms. What could be better than to stand here hungry and be curried like this? If I hadn't been cold, I wouldn't have his hands on my spine, flaring across my shoulder blades. For a moment, it seems possible that every frailty, every pain could be an opening, a crack that lets the unexpected reach us. How can I remember this when I'm old and need so much?
Then, because we're going to run out of time, and ask Doris to read the next poem.
Okay. This is Maya Angelou's poem, and it has very obvious relationships to what we're saying. I think you see it before you. When you see me sitting quietly like a sack left on the shelf, don't think I need your chattering. I'm listening to myself. Hold, stop, don't pity me. Hold, stop your sympathy. Understanding if you got it, otherwise I can do without it. When my bones are stiff and aching and my feet won't climb the stair, I will only ask one favor. Don't bring me no rocking chair. When you see me walking, stumbling, don't study and get it wrong, 'cause tired don't mean lazy, and every goodbye ain't gone. I'm the same person I was back then, a little less hair, a little less chin, a lot less lungs, and much less wind. But ain't I lucky I can still breathe in.
So this is another one of those controversial statements. Terry Tempest Williams said, dying doesn't cause suffering. Resistance to dying is what causes suffering. What if I change that to aging doesn't really cause suffering, resistance to aging does? And what I want to do now is take just a few minutes. We'll take 10 minutes for everybody to get into groups and talk about that. Again, it might be splitting hairs, but I think it's worth pondering. So Samuel Foster, if you would put us into groups now. All right, I'm going to ask for the people who were, first of all, I'm going to suggest that we go over time just a little bit. We've had so many technical problems and we started a little bit late, so we'll try to do better next time, but I want to give us time to report out from the breakout groups. And then we have some closing words that I don't want to miss either. So if we could just go over a few minutes. Thank you so much. Those sound like rich discussions, and I'm sure we could go on for hours. I'm going to try to share my screen again. I want to add that I just want to agree with those of you who said that aging undeniably causes discomfort and increases dependencies, especially on more able bodies or material supports, like we need hearing aids and we need glasses and canes and we need large print books. But according to the Buddhist philosophy, all of this is pain and it isn't the same as suffering. And again, it seems like splitting hairs a little bit, and I agree with all of you about that. My own thinking about it is especially the group that talked about balance. It seems to me that we're on a fence. And on one side is the idea that aging is all bad, all downhill, filled with depression and loss and despair. And there's a lot of press in the culture for that. And on the other side is the idea that we fight it. We pretend that everything's the same, that we can be forever young. And I think if we can find ways to straddle that fence and adapt, as some of you talked about, without falling off the fence, then we can be more open to the wonderful surprises that are possible in later life. So that is sort of my my little summary statement. I want to ask if you have, I guess I'd like to ask if you have something to remember of tonight. Maybe we could ask if anyone wants to share something that's a takeaway from tonight. Since we're running late, I'll accept a few of those. And thank you everyone for your participation. I can't say enough how much I appreciate it. It was our first run at something like this, and I do apologize for some of the technical issues. But I think we made it through. And now I want to leave you with a poem that, before we go, I want to tell you about what the next session is going to be. This one today was more the spiritual, philosophical aspects of aging and death and dying. Next time, it will be more of the pragmatic aspects, thinking about what constitutes a good death and discuss the medical aid in dying legislation that's going on right now in Massachusetts. We'll explore the meaning of good death, learning about barriers to a good death. We'll think about what a good death looks like for ourselves, and we'll get familiar with the Death with Dignity movement. So that's our agenda for next time, and we hope you'll join us for that. And now I want to leave you with Lillian is going to read this poem, Dust If You Must.
Dust if you must, or wouldn't it be better to paint a picture or write a letter? Bake a cake or plant a seed? Ponder the difference between want and need. Dust if you must, but there is not much time with rivers to swim and mountains to climb, music to hear and books to read, friends to cherish and life to lead. Dust if you must, but the world's out there with the sun in your eyes and the wind in your hair, a flutter of snow, a shower of rain. This day will not come around again. Dust if you must, but bear in mind, old age will come and it's not kind. And when you go, and go you must, you yourself will make more dust.